The Central Bank of Russia has issued a stark warning by raising its key interest rate to 14% on September 13, 2025. This dramatic move signals deep concern at the highest levels of Russian finance. Governor Elvira Nabiullina has made it clear, the Russian economy is overheating, pushed beyond its limits by massive state spending. The main culprit? The Kremlin's relentless military expenditures. The economy simply can't absorb this flood of money. There aren't enough workers, factories, or resources. The result? Too much money chasing too few goods, driving prices ever higher. The central bank's actions directly contradict the Kremlin's optimistic narrative. While state media touts resilience, the bank's aggressive rate hikes reveal a very different reality. Inflation is a severe threat. By making borrowing more expensive, the bank hopes to cool demand, even at the cost of short-term growth. The message is clear. Russia's current economic model is unsustainable. The economy is unbalanced, propped up by war spending that distorts markets and crowds out the private sector. Resources are funneled into the military-industrial complex, creating a facade of activity while hollowing out the economy. The central bank is desperately trying to manage the fallout, but the underlying problems remain. Private investment in technology, infrastructure, and consumer goods is being sacrificed. The bank's moves are a last-ditch effort to prevent a full-blown crisis. The Kremlin's war spending is creating dangerous imbalances that threaten long-term stability. The central bank's warning is a rare moment of candor in an otherwise tightly controlled narrative. Russia's economic engine is running hot, but it's running on fumes. Without a change in course, the risk of collapse grows. The writing is on the wall, and the central bank knows it. Russia's economic strain is rooted in its ongoing large-scale military conflict. The war has forced a massive reorientation of the economy, with a huge share of the budget now devoted to military spending. This has created an artificial boom in the defense sector, but it's a short-term fix with long-term costs. Western sanctions have cut Russia off from global markets and advanced technology, raising costs and complicating supply chains. Russian companies now pay more for imports and struggle with inefficient logistics, making their products less competitive. The economy's structural weakness, its dependence on oil and gas exports, makes it vulnerable to global price swings. High oil prices once cushioned the blow, but that buffer is fading as the G7 price cap and loss of the European gas market bite. The private sector remains underdeveloped, dominated by state-owned enterprises and cronyism. The war demands immense resources, sanctions restrict access, and the economy is too weak to adapt. The government's response, printing and spending more money, only fuels inflation. Russia is caught in a vicious cycle. War spending drives inflation, and anti-inflation measures risk recession. The state's short-term fixes are deepening long-term problems. The economy is walking a tightrope with little room for error. Every new measure is a gamble with the country's future. The roots of Russia's crisis run deep, and the solutions are elusive. Russia faces a severe labor shortage, worsened by military mobilization and a mass exodus of skilled professionals. Hundreds of thousands have been drafted and up to 1 million have fled, draining the workforce and fueling a brain drain. With fewer workers, businesses must offer higher wages, which are quickly passed on to consumers as higher prices. Official unemployment is below 3%, a sign not of strength but of a dangerously tight labor market. Companies can't expand, and some are forced to cut production for lack of staff. Official inflation is reported at 7.5%, but everyday Russians feel much higher price hikes, especially for essentials like food and medicine. The ruble's weakness makes imports more expensive, further driving up costs. The central bank's rate hikes aim to cool demand, but high interest rates also stifle what little healthy economic activity remains. Businesses delay investments and consumers cut back on major purchases. The risk, a slide from inflation into stagnation or recession. The central bank is forced to choose between runaway prices and economic paralysis. Russia's labor and inflation crisis is a trap with no easy exit. The pressure is mounting on all sides. The Kremlin has put Russia's economy on a war footing, pouring trillions of rubles into the military-industrial complex. Civilian factories now churn out drones and artillery shells, creating a surge in defense output. State media boasts of record production, but this growth is an illusion. Military goods don't improve daily life or build future prosperity. Capital, labor, and materials are diverted from vital sectors like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The The defense sector booms, offering high wages and job security, but this only worsens labor shortages elsewhere. A two-tier economy emerges. Those tied to the war effort thrive, while the rest struggle with rising costs and stagnant demand. Financing this war economy is unsustainable. The government runs a large deficit, drawing down reserves and borrowing heavily. As the National Wealth Fund shrinks, reliance on printing money or issuing debt grows, fueling more inflation. The cycle is self-defeating. War spending props up the economy in the short term, but undermines long-term stability. The civilian economy is being hollowed out, with little left for future growth. The Kremlin's strategy is a double-edged sword, stimulating now, but sowing seeds of decline. The illusion of strength masks deepening weakness. Russia's war economy is running out of road. The costs are mounting, and the endgame is approaching. For ordinary Russians, the economic squeeze is real and relentless. Inflation erodes salaries and pensions, outpacing wage gains in most sectors. Families cut back on groceries, switch to cheaper products, and watch their living standards fall. Labor shortages mean longer waits and poorer service in everything from healthcare to public transport. Hospitals struggle with too few doctors and nurses, while infrastructure projects stall for lack of skilled workers. Soaring interest rates put home ownership out of reach and make consumer loans unaffordable. Major purchases are postponed, feeding a sense of stagnation and pessimism. The fight against inflation is squeezing household finances to the breaking point. Anxiety and uncertainty are growing, as the war and economic strain reshape daily life. The brain drain of skilled professionals dims hopes for future innovation. Russians are caught between official optimism and the harsh reality of economic hardship. The Kremlin's political choices drive Russia's economic crisis. Record defense spending is a political decision, prioritizing war over civilian well-being and long-term growth. The government accelerates spending while the central bank tries to slam on the brakes. Ad hoc measures like capital controls prop up the ruble but undermine business confidence. These are not signs of a coherent strategy, but of a regime scrambling to contain the fallout. Official rhetoric touts strength but ignores that growth is limited to the military sector, and that low unemployment signals a labor crisis. The disconnect between political narrative and economic reality is widening. The central bank can fight inflation, but it can't stop the government's war spending. Russia's core problems, lack of diversification, weak institutions, and isolation, can't be fixed by monetary policy alone. Deep reform is needed, but the regime resists change. The economy now serves political ambitions, whatever the cost. Russia's economic future looks bleak. The war-fueled model is unsustainable, reserves are dwindling, and borrowing capacity is stretched. The Kremlin faces hard choices: higher taxes, deeper cuts, or printing money, each with dire consequences. Economic weakness will erode Russia's global influence and military power. Sanctions hamper advanced weapons production, and reliance on old equipment isn't a long-term solution. Instability in a nuclear-armed state is a global risk, with potential ripple effects on energy and food markets. The world wants a stable Russia, but current policies lead to isolation and decline. Only a fundamental political shift and real reform can change course. The central bank's alarm is a warning. The current path is a dead end. The question is whether Russia's leaders will listen before it's too late.